first sound is not wind. It is the crisp fracture of air at 70 degrees below zero, a sound that resembles glass being whispered into dust. In the white span of Siberia, a man breathes, and the breath turns to crystal. Frost blossoms across his eyelashes like pale ferns. He does not speak. He counts heartbeats, then the silence between them. A helicopter wreck smolders against the snow, a black wound on a white page, and a figure moves, slow, deliberate, making choices that will decide whether night is something to outlast or something that outlasts him. His name is Alexei Morozov, and the cold is not an enemy, it is a judge. Alexei Morozov is a technician, a careful man with careful hands, assigned to maintain instruments at remote weather stations across the Russian north. He has always preferred clarity over noise, precision over chaos. The work suits him, calibrating sensors, logging data, keeping time in landscapes where clocks feel imaginary. When he travels, he carries a small recorder to narrate notes, the broken rhythm of wind speeds, barometric shifts, small details that anchor the mind in a place where maps feel approximate. He grew up familiar with winter, but not this winter. Not the kind that eats sound and softens edges, the kind that redefines distance as danger. He is neither soldier nor explorer. He is an ordinary man whose days are made of lists, whose nights until now have been unremarkable. By late autumn, the team rotates deeper into the interior. Resupply is routine. The pilot jokes about the view. Alexei secures boxes with fingers like clamps and reviews a checklist for the 5th time. A reflex. He believes the sky is stable. He believes the machine knows its business. He believes weather is a set of facts. The weather refuses the facts. Clouds boil up from nowhere, slope down like gray shoulders, and swallow the helicopter in a curtained haze. Visibility collapses. The machine bucks once, twice. The world drops. Impact is a smear of noise and light, and then silence so complete it hums. Alexei comes to with his cheek pressed to aluminum that is no longer straight. His shoulder lights with pain. Outside, a wind shear writes icy cursive across the wreck. A smell of fuel threads the air, then thins. He inventories. Left arm usable, right shoulder screaming, legs responsive, no fire, no pilot visible. The fuselage sits crooked in a shallow ditch of drifted snow. A thin red light blinks on the instrument panel before surrendering. He thinks of warmth, of the way tea used to steam in dim kitchens when he was young, and then he stops thinking that because it wastes heat. The temperature is a machine of its own, minus 70 degrees Celsius, and there is no shelter here beyond scraps. He cannot wait for luck to remember him. The sun hangs like a blurred pearl and moves reluctantly. He locates the emergency pack, the flare gun, the beacon with its obstinate battery indicator. He memorizes where the horizon fades into itself. He chooses a direction that leads to a hill where perhaps a radio line of sight might stretch farther. He begins. He moves in a pace designed by survival, slow enough not to sweat, steady enough not to stop. The cold is not simply cold, it is needle and weight, a presence that enters joints and tightens them from within. Snow squeaks under his boots, brittle with frost. Frost rimed on his scarf stiffens into armor. The wind's voice is a thin wire, high and constant. He finds the first night before he expects it. Night here is not a color, it is an absence. He builds a trench in the lee of a drift, layers plastic and fabric, lights the stove for precisely 17 minutes. He has rationed the fuel in his mind. The stove sizzles like a promise kept. He warms a can of soup he can barely taste. He breathes through his nose until the pain in his sinuses gives way to a numb clarity. He listens to the recorder, not to speak. His throat tightens at the thought of words, but to hear another rhythm than the wind. Old notes play in his ear. Earlier weather, earlier days, the sound of his own voice from a time when it was an unremarkable thing. He turns the device off to save power and stares at the faint glow of the sky, imagining the arc of satellites, the conversations of cities he cannot see. On the second day, he walks again. The wreck sits behind him like a punctuation mark he refuses to reread. Snowfield gives way to low brush glazed with ice, twigs glassy and fragile. Once, in the corner of his eye, movement. A ribboned herd of reindeer far off, their breath like smoke tearing upward. He watches them for a count of 10 and feels something soften behind his ribs. Life is here, he thinks without words. Evidence of it. He discovers a structure by accident. The shape rises out of the monotony like a thought he forgot he had. A cabin, squat and weather-beaten, half-buried. A station may be older than he is. A place left behind by some previous project and reclaimed by snow. He presses his glove to the door. It resists, then yields with a splintering sigh. Inside, dust has become frost. A metal cot waits without expectation. Shelves hold tin ghosts of food. There is a stove clamped to the floor, a coil of wire, a box of nails in a jar with a rusted lid, and on the table, a notebook bound with string. He closes the door carefully, the way one would in a museum. The notebook's pages are thick and gone wavy. The ink is a faded black that almost doesn't exist. He reads by headlamp. The entries are sparse, temperatures recorded in neat strokes, short remarks about snow depth, about the sound certain winds make when they come from the east. Then entries that are less precise. A line about missing the weight of a sleeping dog against the shins. A line about how silence can feel like a third person in the room. A line about hope, that it is not a feeling, but an action. He stops because his throat tightens again. He sets the notebook aside and works. He checks the chimney draft, clears it, coaxes flame. He inventories the shelves. 2 tins of beans listing toward the 1990s. A packet of biscuits turned to chalk. A bag of tea leaves that still remember sunlight. He boils water. The steam rises like a small miracle and coats his lashes with pearls. He does not drink quickly. He lets the heat unfasten the ache in his shoulder and then fasten it again. He sleeps because sleep is work, and in this landscape, work is survival. Dreams come thin and leave thinner. On the 3rd day, he attempts the beacon. The battery argument continues. The device blinks reluctantly. A low hill behind the cabin promises a clearer sky. He climbs in steps, pausing every 20 paces to conserve the furnace of himself. The air against his lungs feels like powdered glass. On the crest, he lifts the beacon and listens to its whine. He knows satellite passes are not prayers, they are schedules. He holds the device anyway. Timing bursts. He imagines a circuit house somewhere recognizing a hand raised from the ice. He returns to the cabin. He reads more. The writer, unnamed, describes a storm that lasted 5 days, a stove that refused to draw, and the way hunger talks when it thinks it has permission. But threaded between practical notes is a quiet insistence that the world is worth leaning toward. Hope as action. It settles inside Alexei not as comfort, but as instruction. He wonders if the writer ever made it home. There are no closing words, no farewell, no date that ends the log, just a page torn cleanly out, as if the rest of the story continued somewhere else. He stares at that gap longer than he means to. He adopts a routine. Dawn, check weather, note it with pencil stubs. Warm hands against the stove's casing. Midday, venture out, harvest shards of wood, straighten the guy lines still attached to the cabin that hum in the wind like guitar strings. Afternoon, practice breath control to manage cold shock response. Evening, repair what can be repaired, read 1 page, no more, to keep something in reserve. Night, rest, let memory unspool and rewind without chasing it. Days stretch into one another. He begins to feel his body thinning, energy folding inward like the flame when fuel runs low. Movement slow, thought slows. His clothes grow looser. He notices the hollow between ribs deepen. Each night, the sound of his pulse in his ears feels heavier, older. The memory that returns most is a small, ordinary room. A pot of tea steaming against a window rimed with frost. A pair of hands not his, folding a cloth, the fabric thinner at the edges. A lamp turned low. No drama, only proximity and quiet. The mind is cruel in what it remembers and merciful in what it forgets. He lets both happen and counts heartbeats. On the 5th day, he sees a sky trick. The northern lights unfurl with a stealthy grace, a curtain that ripples in green, a whisper colored into air. For a few minutes, the cold is less, not warmer, only less unforgiving. He does not mistake it for a signal intended for him. He receives it anyway. On the 7th day, the cabin begins to feel smaller. Supplies diminish predictably. The beans taste of metal, the biscuits of chalk, the tea of old pages. He recalculates. The beacon battery does not care about recalculations. He notes the fatigue that sits behind his eyes like a weight. He considers the reindeer. They passed moving west. Tracks might still exist in sheltered cutbanks, in the lee of hummocks. Tracks mean movement toward forage. Forage means lower terrain, maybe a river course. A river course means people, eventually, or at least a place a helicopter might search. The thought is not romantic, it is geometry. He marks his route on paper torn from the back of the notebook. He fashions a sled from a cot frame and rope. He strips the cabin of nothing more than he needs and leaves the rest as it is, a museum cataloged by necessity. On the table, he places the recorder and speaks into it for the first time since the wreck. Not words of farewell, only numbers and bearings and the schedule of his planned movement. He seals the recorder and the notebook in a plastic bag and tucks it beneath the kettle on the stove, weighting it with 2 nails for a future he can't guarantee. He cleans the stove as if someone else will use it tonight. He steps into a morning that slices. The westward route tests him harder than the cabin ever could. The terrain dips and rises, each ridge a ledger of wind. Snow has lied about its depth. Drifts swallow his shins, then his thighs. The sled catches on hidden brush and jerks like a trapped animal. He keeps his pace, avoids sweat, sips water in ice-bead quantities to trick his mouth into believing in rivers. His shoulder is quieter now, either healing or giving up its complaint. The tracks he sought flicker into existence and vanish, hoof prints preserved in hollows, then scoured away on exposed crests. He reads the landscape the way a child might read lips, guessing at the phrases, accepting he may be wrong. By late afternoon, the sky slides toward 10. His breath plumes in a steady metronome. He begins to feel the edges of his body blur, a warning he notes with a detached professionalism. He repeats a set of motions learned from training. Flex fingers, roll shoulders, squat and rise, not to warm, but to keep the mechanisms talking to each other. Then weather turns like a door. A katabatic wind slams down from the ridge with intent. Fine snow lifts in sheets and erases the world. He knows what whiteout means and does not argue with it. He drops, anchors the sled, hunkers behind it, and builds a fast shelter with shovel in hands, a coffin with intention. The wind worms into every seam. It hisses across the fabric like boiling water. He counts breaths, then stops counting and counts heartbeats, then stops counting and finds the syllables of his own name without saying them. He focuses on the image of the stove back in the cabin, the discipline of cleaning it, the kettle weighted with nails, the recorder asleep beneath it. He pictures the notebook. He remembers the line about hope being an action. He waits for the wind to spend itself. It does not. It only changes pitch. Hours fold and unfold with a brutal patience. Cold layers itself like lacquer. The edges of his vision silver over. He recognizes the first soft seduction of sleep for what it is. He resists by making work, rubbing wrists, flexing toes, retying knots that do not need it. His thought narrows. The present becomes a tunnel, and at the end of it is an instruction. Move when you can. At some hour that might be night or might be a darker kind of day, the wind drops half a note. He emerges from the shallow shelter like a diver breaking surface. The world is featureless. He must choose a direction without evidence. He closes his eyes and lets his inner ear take a bearing from habit, from the known slope of terrain he has already crossed, from the feel of the wind's residual on his cheek. West is not confidence. It is a decision. He walks. Steps become sequences. Sequences become music he plays to himself without melody. He thinks he sees a line of dark on the horizon. He thinks he smells something that is not ice, something bitter and distant like smoke gone asleep. He follows it. The line refuses detail for a long time, then admits to being a tree line, and beyond it, a carved river valley wrapped in mist. He descends ungainly and relentless. Snow becomes packed crust near the bank. The world has edges again. He stops and listens, and in the careful quiet hears a sound that is not wind, a faint droning miles off, the instrument of rescue he no longer expects. He pulls the beacon. He lifts it to the gap in the clouds that looks thinner than the rest. The device blinks with the energy left to it. He times the bursts again by habit. He angles the antenna as if pointing his chin toward a person he cannot see. Unbeknownst to him, the earlier signal he sent from the cabin had been received. Faint, fragmented, but enough to trigger a search pattern. The same coordinates now align with this second weak pulse, giving rescuers a line between 2 points, a narrow path through the storm. The drone grows louder. The sky offers no assurance. The machine veers south, then east. He watches it go with the calm of a man who has become a fact among other facts. He lowers the beacon to conserve what is left. He sets his jaw against a trembling he does not give permission to. He turns toward the tree line for shelter. The first step collapses. His knees fold. The snow receives him as if it has been waiting. He lies on his side, breath quick, then slower. The ground smells like old leaves embalmed in ice. He thinks of that ordinary room again, of tea steam, of hands not his. He tells his body without words to get up. The body reels, argues with gravity, staggers to one knee, and falls back. The sound he makes is small and angrily human. The cold moves in as if invited. He understands that this is the moment everyone imagines and describes as a choice. It does not feel like a choice. It feels like a probability problem he can no longer solve. He closes his eyes, not to sleep, but to keep the world contained. Above him, the sky is the pale blue of porcelain. To the west, the river bends like a seam. A second sound arrives, low and nearer, and with it the hard stutter of rotor blades chopping winter into manageable pieces. The helicopter is not graceful. It lurches into position as if ashamed to be late. Snow spirals under it in fierce halos. The machine hovers, slides, and sets down with a swaggering determination that feels like apology and promise braided together. The rescuers move with the efficiency of those who are scared but trained not to show it. They do not shout. Sound is swallowed here. They kneel, they check, they lift, they blanket. They package him in warmth that feels like returning to a language he once spoke. Hands measure his pulse, count respirations, read the story written in pallor and tremor, and the dull ache of a shoulder that has held too much. They note the weight he has shed, the looseness at his belt, the slow-to-rise heat of his skin. They move him inside the aircraft, and the doors slide the world away. In the air, warmth makes the body riot. Pain returns in bright, pushy colors. He lets professionals monitor and measure him. He lets heat and fluids and oxygen do what training says they will do. Through the small window, the white emptiness pulls back in long, silent gestures. He sees the ridge where the wind became a wall. He sees the seam of the river. He sees the faint scratch of his passage written across the frozen page. Somewhere in the headset chatter, he becomes aware, without needing the words, that they found him by drawing a line between two weak signals. One cast from the hill behind the cabin days ago, another from the valley where he fell. The line made a corridor. The corridor made a choice. The choice made a rescue. At a field hospital, bustle is quiet by force. Everything smells of antiseptic and coffee left too long on a burner. Lights are lowered because the world has been bright enough. He answers questions with spare nouns and the careful honesty of men who respect detail. He sleeps in segments and wakes to the ordinary miracle of blankets that hold their heat, to the even more ordinary miracle of other people moving around him with a purpose that includes him without any request from him. His shoulder is immobilized. His core temperature rises by measure. The pulse in his ears quiets from a drum to a metronome. Days later, strength returns in small currencies, steadier steps, a thicker voice. the simple appetite for soup that tastes like something other than metal and memory. He walks outside into a modest winter that would have terrified him a week earlier. The air cuts, but only like a reminder. Snow in the city behaves. It edges sidewalks, salts rooftops, decorates trees instead of defining the earth. Cars hiss by. Someone tugs a scarf tighter. Light hangs from buildings in domestic geometry. He puts one foot in front of the other and is grateful for friction. A small envelope arrives from the search team that traced his route backward. Inside, the notebook has been dried and flattened, the ink stabilized by careful hands. A typed transcription accompanies it, page after page of temperatures and practicalities, and then those quiet sentences that insisted the world was worth leaning toward. He finds the final entry he had not reached before leaving the cabin. It is plain and unbeautiful in exactly the way truth often is. The writer survived after months of waiting, was finally collected by a late-season patrol, and left the stove clean in case anyone else needed it. Beneath the note is a date and a sketch of the river's bend. The revelation lands like a soft clap. The words that carried him forward were not a record of disappearance, but a record of endurance. Hope was not an epilogue for that earlier traveler. It was a method. He realizes that he has joined a quiet lineage, people who survive by making rooms ready for strangers they may never meet. He returns to work not because he must, but because the work made sense when little else did. He speaks less and listens more. On his desk, the recorder sits where others might keep photographs. He does not play the survival days. He lets them rest, a chapter closed but present. Sometimes, on ordinary afternoons, he listens to older notes about wind directions and harmless storms. The sound of his own voice from before reminds him that ordinary days are the miracles no one names. Weeks turn. He visits the hangar to thank a mechanic who, without fanfare, runs a hand along the lip of an old stove salvaged from a shuttered site and nods as if acknowledging a colleague. He learns that the team, after evacuating him, flew a second pass along the corridor between pings, found his sled track stitched across the basin, and followed it like a sentence to the cabin. They collected the recorder and the notebook, reset the door against weather, and left a small bundle of dry wood by the stove. The detail feels like a benediction. The chain of care did not end with him. Life resumes its unspectacular shape. He buys tea that steams like a memory and watches the window fog slightly in a way that is safe, domestic, almost tender. He notices a lamp's cone of light, a folded cloth on a table, the easy silence that floats between people who share a room without needing to fill it. He does not dramatize. He trims his lists until they fit a human day. He remembers that his job is to pay attention. He will be asked what saved him. He will list the facts, layers that trapped heat, discipline that avoided sweat, a trench dug in the lee of a drift, a stove coaxed into service, a notebook that valued detail, a beacon that whispered instead of sang, a river that taught direction, a rescue team that believed 2 faint signals were enough. He will describe the sequence without myth. But when he is alone, he will know the answer keeps a different shape. It is the practice of small faith in ordinary tasks. A stove cleaned so someone else might believe there was usefulness here. Notes kept not to impress but to witness. Decisions made not once in a blaze of courage but repeatedly, in increments, each indistinguishable from the next until they add up to a life continued. The cold judged him, yes, but the verdict was written by everything he chose to do while no one was watching. The cabin remains where it is. The kettle sits slightly dented. 2 nails keep their patient vigil. Somewhere, perhaps years from now, a traveler will push open that door and feel less alone because strangers before them refuse to be careless with their attention. In that imagined moment, the silence inside the room will feel inhabited. The third presence will be hope, not as a sensation, but as a set of habits. If this journey through cold and quiet left a small warmth in you, pass it on. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that ordinary, consistent acts, tidying a room, keeping a promise, showing up again tomorrow, can bend a line away from darkness. Like, share and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people who choose hope not because it is easy, but because it is within reach.